Welcome to Good Goodbyes, the Funeral Facts podcast. We are really glad you found us. In this podcast, me, Simon, a funeral director,
and me, Tina, I'm an independent celebrant.
we're going to discuss all things funeral in an informal space to demystify what happens when we say goodbye.
Based on your questions and queries, Si and myself are two industry professionals that are going to chat through the hows, whats and wherefores. We actively work in the funeral industry in Devon in the UK. So, we hope you enjoy the episode ahead. Welcome to Good Goodbyes. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Good Goodbyes. I'm here, Tina, with a guest episode with Richard, who in a moment I'm going to ask to introduce himself. And Richard is from scatteringashes.co.uk. So, Richard, hello. It's lovely to have you on.
Hello, Tina. Thanks for inviting me.
So, ashes. What got you into having a company that deals with ashes?
So I was reasonably young when I asked my dad about the age of 25, and we had the funeral and all that sort of thing. And then we were kind of given the ashes by the funeral director and pretty much left to our own devices. Mum said, oh, my dad's religion was golf, so we chose the golf club. And off we went one November day, and it was... they didn't really want us there. They didn't really help us. It was just all a bit, just wasn't really good. We just felt left alone when my dad's golfing partners got him a memorial bench. Mum was over the moon, and then they moved it without telling us. So I just thought the whole thing just seemed a little bit, we weren't helped in any way, shape, or form. So when I started, I worked for the government for many years, and when I saw that coming to an end, there was redundancies on the table. I thought, oh blimey, I could help in this direction, I thought to myself. And so I started doing a bit of research. Started a blog in 2010. And then it's kind of gone on from there, just writing about things that I find interesting that I've come across and trying to just provide the best help and guidance for people. The purpose is to provide people with choice and then the confidence in making that decision.
That's such a perfect summary. I think a lot of people... my experience as a celebrant, and perhaps, as a human as well, with my own mum's ashes, which is the only ashes I've ever had to deal with. My mum was in 3 parts. So my dad wanted her to have a final resting place that he's going to share. Mm-hmm. And then she had made it really clear before her death that she wanted some of her to be in 10B, which was her childhood home. So that was a comical event with me and my sisters trying to pop her into the sea, in a kind of discreet way.
Yes.
And she kept floating back, and my one sister was finding this all very difficult, but we didn't really think about the tides and what have you. But I think on the whole, she would have enjoyed the hilarity of the situation. The fact that we all had a cup of tea and a Welsh cake afterwards. And then there's a little bit of her left to be sprinkled with a little bit of my dad when he goes in a seaside town that they've spent a lot of their time in. So I do have a bit of her in a tube still somewhere in the house. So
that is so common what you're describing there. Splitting the ashes is now very common. Some people still don't like doing it, but others do, for exactly those purposes. And what's interesting is you've named a few of the reasons why people choose the specific locations that they do. Childhood, where they grew up, very formative years, holiday destinations from the youth, another big one, being with another person, so like, joint grave, that sort of thing, or a joint spot that they've chosen, sport locations, things like that. So and you've done all 3 and then kept a bit as well, just for when the time comes. So that's a perfect example, I would say, Tina.
Yeah. And it's interesting the feelings that come with all of that, Richard, isn't there? Because the third that remains, I've got 2 sisters, and one of my sisters was saying the other day, I feel a bit guilty that we haven't sort of completely sorted mum out. And I said, well, we're waiting, aren't we, for a particular event to happen? But I think that, and my experience as a celebrant, is that a lot of people have a little bit of guilt associated with ashes.
Yeah, yeah.
They either fall sort of into two camps for me, I say, and this is a generalization, listeners, so forgive me for this. One, they know exactly what they want to do. So they've found some information, maybe a little note somewhere. And on your website, Richard has a great example of somebody who finds an instruction in a cookbook. So, there's either that and they know exactly what they want to do. And when I ask them their intentions, they're like, oh, we're going to do this on this date, or this is our location. We know what we're doing. Or the second group of people seem to be, we don't know. And often they don't do anything for a long period of time. And then they either start to feel guilty that they haven't done anything in the interval, and then they get in an uncomfortable space, or they just never do anything.
Yes.
So, yeah. Do you find that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. And the former category is probably slightly smaller than the latter, because people don't know what to do, and they don't leave any notes. And then, as you say, people are paralyzed by a sort of like, I could get this wrong. Yeah. So they think that seems to be holding people back no end of times, to be honest with you. And they just go, well, what should we do? So they ended up in the state of paralysis. So that's kind of our job, to help them, go through the thought process of, what will be best, and to try and help them, relieve them of this guilt. Because we hear a lot of people say, I need to set them free. I hear this time and time again, and it's irrespective of upbringing, irrespective of religion. So I hear my Hindu and Sikh clients say this just as much as my Christian or secular clients. It's that set them free, but which could translate to they want to, like, not finish the process. That's too brutal a term, but they want to release themselves just as much as they want to release that person back into nature. So it kind of cuts both ways, really.
Yeah. I think there's something about what you say that feels like a completeness of a certain stage of this whole process of grieving and moving on from a death. There's a completeness to stage one. All of their remains, in whatever form they took, have been, could say, dealt with, but released. Something has happened, something meaningful has happened. What can help, Richard, then? So if we've got listeners who are either sitting on remains and ashes where they're just feeling a bit uncomfortable, or they're thinking, oh, actually, we have got somebody in the cupboard, or are in that paralysis moment, or don't know what to do, how can they be guided? What's your thoughts?
So our first bit of advice is don't rush, because people, and often we find that there's pressure from one person or two people in the family, and it's often pressure from the kids going, Mum, come on, we've got to get this done, and there isn't a rush, there shouldn't be. It should be when you're ready to do it yourself. But then that comes to a point where you go, okay, when you're ready to release, then you think, well, okay, where and what, and then you kind of just give it, it's a bit of like just a thought process, really. Where did you feel closest to them? Do you want to revisit that spot? Because again, people go, oh, I scattered them in Aberdeen and I live in Dorset, and that's not going to work for me. So you need to think about where the location is. You need to think, will that place be used for anything else? I had a Surrey case of this chap who scattered his son at the barracks in Plymouth, and then now they're going to be turned into housing. And he thought, well, in his head, they were never going to be, because it was the barracks in Plymouth. They've been there for a long time, hundreds of years, let's say, and then their use has been converted. So you need to kind of think, well, will I be able to access this site again? Will this place still be what I think it will be? So like Woodland is quite a nice one, because sort of out of town. If you choose urban locations, I was advised against urban parks because they don't like it. The parks authorities and the town councils, they don't like it because it's used heavily as an urbanised space. So even if it was sort of precious to you, then maybe a token amount maybe just a little gesture. If they said, "Oh, I wanted to be under that oak tree in a certain park," they're just a little bit there, but the majority elsewhere. Because usually it's not ideal for park users to be confronted with this, because it's just it can be a bit messy, if that's the right term. But I say don't. It's not about. It's about giving it some thought, and I think that's some people just act because they don't want to engage with the thought process of it, and then that causes more of the problems than anything else, because they just go, "Oh, let me get just to do it and do it wrong," or they just don't put any thought into it. "Oh, let's just get this done and out of the way," and then they'll scatter and go, "Oh, well, we could have done a bit better job of that." So I say to people, have a little bit of a reflection as to what you want. It's your ceremony, and with the rise of direct cremation, so it's not. I mean, you'll experience this, Tina. You see, like, whatever it is, 20% people direct cremated, and it's usually a choice of the parent, and it's not ideal. Put me in the bin, get rid of me. I don't want, all this sort of malarkey. It comes around to the kids. The kids go, "Oh, the mum died in hospital." Then the next thing is a hearse will pick up the body, take it to like one of these crematoriums in the middle of nowhere, and within a fortnight you've got your ashes back with no sense of service or nothing like that. So then that adds to the sort of paralysis. So it's sort of it's about just having a think about what you want for your ceremony, your location, what resonates with you. Take a bit of time, and when you have thought about it, things will start clicking into place. But I think sometimes people just run from it a bit. And they're paranoid about getting it wrong, and they don't like to consider death, and it kind of and they end up sort of like just making a bit of a bodge of it, really.
Yeah, I think I've recently had two experiences that have really made me think about this. The first one made me think about how our kind of industry, whether it's a celebrant, a funeral director, somebody like yourself, Richard, or even a minister, if somebody who has some expertise can be a good sounding board, just somebody to share ideas with. And it's a bit like the thing that people get a bit stuck, and they think that they have expertise and they don't really need to talk to anyone else. But actually, sometimes it's just quite useful, like the way that we think we know where we want to go on a holiday. If we go into a travel agents, they have all sorts of ideas that we hadn't even thought about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's the same sort of idea. But I recently helped a family have an interment because their mum had had a direct cremation. They hadn't known about it. Everything that you just said. The ash had arrived back with them. The two daughters felt that this was all wrong, that they hadn't had their goodbye, and people wanted to come over from France, and it all just felt wrong. We designed their ceremony by, because they were going to be interned in a graveyard. So by the graveside, and we sat around in the sunshine. We told lots of stories about her. And all of her funny little ways, and then we listened to some music, and we let the ashes go and have a plaque on them. So that was their decision. That's what they wanted to do. But during that conversation, we talked about all sorts of a variety of things that they could do. So that was quite interesting. Another one was that a friend, they wanted to release their mum's ashes, and they were all keen wild swimmers. So they decided to take her in a plastic container, her ashes, out to a sort of semi-distance from the beach, and release her there. And my friend said all it created was a bit of a slick on top of the water.
Which it would have done, yeah, absolutely.
And she said, whilst it was partly hilarious, partly not, and it is just one of those things we'll always talk about as a family of like, why hadn't we thought that through? She said afterwards, after the fact, which is a shame, she said, what could we have done? And I said, well, there's so many things that you could have gone out with her. There's a paper mache container you could have taken footage, you could have swam out with that. You could have done something with boats, which I think you do, Richard, don't you? And I just feel like if people have conversations, it does help them with their choices. That's not us dictating what they need to do, but there is a myriad of choice.
There's a myriad of choice, and often you don't, when you just, it doesn't have to be I don't think anybody expertise some of the time. It just has to be, because sometimes when you hear your own thoughts reflected back at you, have you thought this through? It can just, oh yeah. because in that case, the ashes, a lot of them are very, very fine particles, and they will sit and not break the surface tension of the water, and they'll just sit there. I mean, they'll go eventually, but I just had these visions of your friends trying to swim away from this like ash slick.
Well, I mean, it's kind of, I think that's kind of what happens. And she was saying, we just in our minds thought that they'd be heavy and sink and it wouldn't be an issue.
Some of it are. Some of it is, and some of it isn't. It's the tiny bits that blow about. That's why we kind of encourage people to use like a biodegradable urn for that very reason, really, because they do get carried on. And when you do water ceremonies, and a lot of people use the water because you don't need to ask permission. There's always wind on the water, always. No matter where you are, and so these finer particles can get attached to the side of a boat or whatever. It can be anything really. So yes, I think it's a wise move. It's a wise move.
Yeah. The other intriguing thing about that day that I did the interment was, as I was leaving, it was a very hot day. There was a fella, and I'd seen him in the distance, kind of walking around, looking like he was searching for something. So I wandered towards him, and I said, "Are you okay? Do you know where you are and what you need?" He said, I've done my ancestry and I'm looking for a person. He said, and it's kind of supposedly vaguely here. And I said, oh, okay, buried. And he said, no, ashes. And so we were kind of like about this whole debate about what he knew about his person, the person he was trying to trace. Did he know whether it was a scattering of ashes or whether the ashes had been placed in the ground somewhere? And he wasn't aware. And I thought, where do we, if we're in a situation where in the time to come, we want to be found where our ashes are, because there's so many choices now to where you could be scattered. Is there, or we were looking historically, is there somewhere where we can find out that information?
Well, that's the ashes register. And that's set up. So a bit of a sort of a rationale with that. So that we set this up a few years ago. The point being, we got 80% of us cremate, 80% then remove the crematoria, and then 80% of those go on to scatter. So you're looking in the UK alone, like well over 250,000 people scattering per year, and then they kind of like. And as I say, they're not guided. They then scatter, and they don't necessarily think about the location. You might think, well, I'll always know where it is, and it's always in my heart. And I thought the government did stuff like that, as if the government could magic some Mr. Ben type civil servant out of the ether, which then recorded this location and produced an official certificate for them. So no, these things don't happen. It's down to the family and down to recording it. So the ashes register is there so that people can just sort of, it's for free, that you can say, George Templeton, scatter this spot, date of birth, date of death, job, not job done, but it's sort of, so somewhere for them to mark it for posterity. Because if you think of it in genealogical terms, we've been recording someone's last resting place since medieval times, right? So it's a super important thing that we do, and people have kind of it just doesn't occur to them that this is what they've just created, a piece of history. They've just created the final chapter in someone's story, and without recording, and that final chapter's gone within a generation. So the purpose is you can then link this to your genealogy. You get born where you're born, you're married probably where your in-laws parents live, you die probably in proximity from where you used to work or whatever it might be, but where you scatter, like it's referring to this initial part of this conversation, where you scatter is intrinsically unique. And so with the tembe, with the these are so resonant to the person's life story. That's why I think it's a really important element of things to capture. And so if people can do that, you just register, and then you can register a scattering. It's free. So I just encourage everybody I can, Tina, to do that, because it is important going forward. People say, "Oh, I'm not too worried," but then you look at things like, the cenotaph, it's the tomb of the unknown soldier. There's all the pomp and ceremony because we didn't have a last resting place for all those lads in the First World War. So, to say that we're not worried or fussed or anything about it, that's not true. People say, I'm not fussed. Then you say to them, what, so you're all right with your parents or even your kids' last resting place being forgotten? They go, oh, no, of course I'm not all right about that. So, you know, they do consider, but is there that's that British attitude sometimes. It's a bit nonsensical, really, in terms of like memorialisation. Does my head in. And I think, you know, it's part of the rationale for the sort of direct cremation, this sort of self-effacing sort of put me in the bin type mentality that does my noddle in, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we do have in the UK a bit of a fuss and nonsense kind of a, you know, approach to thing. And I mean, I was talking to somebody, because sometimes I do people's ceremony planning before their death. So I'm talking to them about their own plans. And often it's not going to, it's preparation, and it's not going to be a long time ahead because they know they haven't got as long as they wish they had. And you know, I was talking to one guy very similar. I said, "Oh, I'm having nothing. I'm doing X, I'm doing Y," you know, and sort of put me in a bin liner kind of conversation. Yeah. And I said, "Well, that's all well and good." I said, "But it's not really just about you."
Yeah.
It just
that's right. It's right. It's not really.
It is about you, obviously, but equally,
you're there in sorts.
You know, it's about everyone left behind. So, you know, there's a little bit of thought to be given to, you know, is there going to be any opportunity for them to say goodbye to you in some way, shape, or form? We don't ignore when children are born. We don't ignore the other milestones in a life, and this is a milestone. And I think, personally, some of the fuss and nonsense approaches, because it comes from fear. And my saying is always, Richard, you know, if you talk about death, you're not going to die. You know, just talking about it is not going to result.
It's not going to cause anything to. It's not going to cause an existential crisis.
Exactly. So it will be okay to prepare, to chat and prepare, and for folk to have a bit of knowledge about what you might like, so they feel more comforted by the fact that whatever they do after you have gone is a little bit at least in keeping. And you see the relief on families' faces when they don't know much, and then they might find something in a biscuit tin or in a drawer or
in a biscuit tin.
Yeah, and it might just be, I mean, a family I was with once just found in a biscuit tin some clippings of poems that and on the back it was written, "I like these," and they were like, "Great, that's a clue."
That helps, doesn't it?
That'll do for us. And those poems and what was in them and the kind of thing they were entirely guided how we ran that ceremony, and they felt comforted by that.
So, absolutely, they would. Yeah. So your gentleman who says, you know, fuss and not, it is fear. I think it is fear. Yeah, you're right. It is, and. You're right. It won't impact anything if you just sort of like put that to the side. I mean, even, you know, doing what I do, all my friends and relatives, you know, they know what I do. And so, you know, I'm always saying to them, they go, and you sort of see them just slightly, you know, not comfortable. I go, well, it is going to happen. So, and you know, having that, facing up to that reality will actually empower you more than anything else, I think. But that's probably...
No, I think so. I mean, I was a nurse in a hospice for years, and people would say to me, "Oh, it must be a really tricky place to work." It was a very joyful place to work. And actually, when people knew that their time was limited, they began to embrace living, and it was all more about the living than the rest of it. And lots and lots, you saw people making lots and lots of legacy plans of all sorts of descriptions. So, thinking again about ashes then, so we would definitely put the link into the ashes register, Richard, because I think that, you know, I can well imagine people in the future looking for relatives and, you know, and not being able to find them.
We get people calling us all the time. That was part of the reason for people going, well, where is it? Like, as if is somebody else's responsibility. It's like, well, why hasn't someone intervened to do this on my behalf? And I'm quite aggrieved by it. It's like, no, there is a responsibility to do this, and the responsibility falls to the family.
Yeah. And, you know, and if help is needed, we can be there. People from our industry can absolutely be there. So Celebrant, I'll be happy to be there for you. I'm even happy just to take a phone call, which doesn't lead to a job for me. I just give you a bit of guidance, and I wouldn't be alone in that. I know.
No, we get calls all the time. We had a lady phoning up yesterday about like she had the step. We have a lot of issues with step families and ashes. They are kind of they either funny, like you can't send ashes through the post. When I asked the post offices, this is because they're priceless, and I get it. It is the actual meaning of it. You could not put a price. For some people, they are irrelevant detritus of a body that's gone, and for others, they are absolutely the first thing they would rescue if there's a fire in the house. You know what I mean? So it just depends. And so this lady was like, oh, my stepdaughter is insisting that I do something about it, and I think. I think that I'm not ready. So she thinks she's going to come around the house and take them. How can I protect them from this and all this sort of thing? So we get this. We get this a lot. And I do say to them, I say, like, if you can split the ashes, that's a wise, sensible sense, and everybody's kind of. But that sometimes when it goes down these family little routes, they kind of like they've entrenched them. They want to be right, and therefore giving any quarter at all is sort of seen as, I don't know, a weakness. I don't know. But like,
I do think, yeah. You see it a lot, Richard, in our line of work. And I said to Si recently that we will do an episode on when dealing with your loved one is difficult. When your loved one wasn't such a loved one, or when all the issues come up. Weddings and funerals are classic places for bringing out the best and the worst in people.
They are, yeah.
That's often an inconvenient thing that we don't talk about, but it's an absolute truth. I see it all the time. But yeah, bringing a little kindness to those situations and seeing if you can share and work something out together is always my best advice for comfort in the long run.
It is, and it's like we never own them. The way I approach this, we never own them truly all in life. So why would we think we own them all in death? We don't. We're not asked to guard as that I'm the uniquely the person that's lost this person. Yeah. So the ashes kind of are a manifestation, a sort of physical representation of this, and so there's no rules against it. And I do hear people say, "Oh, I don't want to give them a leg or an arm." It's like, it's just. Oh.
I know. There's a very literalism to it, isn't there? But
isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to have a bit of ashes with you all the time. I know that on your website there's all the various kind of options, because there are lots of options. You don't.
Oh, so many.
Place ashes, in the environment. There's all sorts, isn't there?
Yeah, and I know I mean, by the way, if people aren't aware that 90% plus of ashes all end up in the bedroom. They all end up in the bedroom, under the bed, in the bedside cabinet, or in the wardrobe. That's where they all end up. And and when a classic one is like, yeah, but I don't want them all to go. Well, you don't have to let them all go. You can keep a little bit. You can put some in an ornament. You can put some in some jewelry. Jewelry I like, but I do worry about, well, when would you use it? Because often, if you're like me, you're paranoid of losing everything. I just lose everything. So it's sort of something that just a keepsake, sort of like you can glass or whatever it might be. But it's something like that you can hold on to. So you've kind of the majority of them are up on Dartmoor or whatever, blowing in the wind, and then you've just got a little bit that you can speak to. We show like. Probably the most popular thing we said is robins. People love robins. Yeah. People love them, and they kind of connect them with the deceased. And people have phoned up to me and they say, "Oh, it's brilliant. I have it there. Have a little chat with it every day when I'm coming in and out the lounge and stuff like that." And it's sort of that touchdown. And it's quite powerful, really. So there is plenty of things you can do. So just keep. And if you're going to scatter and you are wearing them, just keep a bit back. Just keep a little bit back.
Yeah,
it doesn't hurt.
No, exactly. There's everything you've said makes such sense. And I've known a potter who's used a bit of ashes in Reiki pottery, which is the style of how they glaze. Because, they were both into their pottery, and that was what happened with some of those ashes, but not all of them. And I've known someone who did a house clearance and was like, what? Of somebody who didn't have anyone else to assist them, and then was like, what do I do? I've found 4 lots of ashes in the wardrobe.
Yeah. It happens. Or house clearances. The storage companies. I've had calls from them saying when they get rid of sort of like the nephew might have just gone, "Oh, I can't deal with Auntie's house. I'll put it all in storage, defaults on the storage, and the storage company are allowed to sell off everything in there that's non-personal. But then they go, what do we do with the ashes? So they do get left in some very peculiar places. And I say that's part, again, you were saying earlier, that if someone gets paralyzed in decision making, no, imagine that with 4 of them. I mean, how do you do it for 4 of them? Especially if they're unrelated. I mean, you'd have to, it's just,
yeah. I was, as you've been chatting, an idea has been forming in my mind, and I've been thinking perhaps we should start campaigning for National Ashes Week. I mean, there's days for all sorts of things, isn't there? Friendship days and all sorts of other days. So we could have. I thought of a day, and then I thought, well, a week would be more helpful. But National Ashes Week is a week in which you can revisit the idea of either going to visit where ashes are scattered of those you love, if you wish, or you could go and do something with ashes that you haven't resolved that yet, and you just kind of were wondering, or if you haven't even collected them yet, then you might want to do that.
I love that, Tina. I love that. We think about 250,000 unclaimed sets in the UK, something like that.
It's a big number, isn't it?
It is, yes. So some of them have got like thousands and thousands. They're warehouses full. And, it's dating back 50, 60, 70 years. And, it's just so sad. So we're kind of working with the various trade feds and all this sort of thing to try and give people a sort of a dignified end. Because, they didn't deserve to be left on the shelf indefinitely, did they? Do you know what I mean? It's got to be a better solution than staying on a shelf. It's just
and like
not right.
You were saying about cenotaphs and other places where obviously people go to remember large numbers of folk. And I'm also thinking of, I worked in Lockerbie after the Lockerbie disaster.
Did you?
Nearby, I worked in Dumfries and Galloway, and I was doing some nurse training there. Almost a year after that happened. And to go to that town and walk in that parkland where there's that memorial just feels a very special thing to do. And so we gravitate towards this idea when we can't choose where remains are, or when maybe it feels tricky for whatever reason. And I'm thinking, well, there could be, couldn't there? It could be a place where on Ashes Week, all the allocated ashes are placed with a ceremony of sorts, and then and on the ashes register, and then everyone can know, and maybe we can get away from the guilty feelings.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, probably not all of them. With so many, the environmental impact of 250,000 sets of ashes might be a bit. But you could do it, say, like, like 25 years. If they've been left over 25 years or more, then you could, And so we're trying to engage with crematoria and stuff like that, so that because they are kind of like places where are used to dealing with ash. They keep records and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think that I like the Ashes Awareness Week. I love that.
And maybe this little memorial is in each community's got one, like on Cenotaph Day when we would all go to wherever our local one is. Yes, well, work is ahead for us, Richard. I feel
there's something in that. I like that. I just need so to do this. I just need to get the funeral directors to realise that this is a cost, and then they need to chip in a bit. So maybe when they do chip in a bit, we'll say, well, we could spend a bit on PR, and we could get an Ashes Awareness Week. I love it.
And I mean, it's good for the people, isn't it? And I do wonder whether that it's part of an upfront conversation when we first meet families to say, of course, you need to take some time, but if your ashes are still with the crematoria or funeral director a year after, then, we will write to you again to say, do you want to collect them? And if not, there might be a process that happens.
Yeah, I think some of them do, some of them don't. Yeah. Looking at FD's funeral procedures, there's such a variety. There's no consistency at all, and some of them are irreverent. Some of them are irreverent. It's just funeral directors. There's some amazing operators out there, and ones that probably shouldn't be necessarily in business. It's just one of them things, isn't it, really? So we just have to focus on the good ones, really.
Yeah, because it's an independent sector, so you get that variety like you do in any world, don't you?
Like any sector, sector.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And people sort of like, because it's sort of semi-shrouded, there, no pun intended, it kind of like, people just, they think it's regulated, they think all sorts, don't they? And it's not necessarily true.
No, that's very true. Yeah, and change will probably be coming in the sector, I think, because of events in the last couple of years. So, I mean, maybe as that change happens, it will give more assurance to our listeners and the public in general, really.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So before we wrap up then, Richard, is there anything particular you wanted to say that I haven't asked you already, or anything you want to leave behind as a message for our listeners?
Is there anything I haven't said already? So, yeah, it's about taking time and just giving it some thought. But there is plenty of choice out there. You can have something in the garden. You can have a bit of glass. You can have a Viking boat if you want to. They're quite popular. So if you want to go for the full, Nordic send-off and flaming arrows into the sky, we can do that. And there's things like the sky. You can go for fireworks or into space, or you can go drones. We have boats. Again, water makes a great ceremony, and using a boat can give you the family that privacy. So, and if you have got an idea that you think, well, actually, I'd like to do X, Y, or Z, then you can always put it by us, and we'll see if we can sort it for you. So we've got memorial reefs off of Dorset, so that they're creating a little ecosystem there for little lobsters and things like that. So again, and these are from probably people saying, well, I'm a diver and I want to do this, or I'm a pilot in the RAF, so we can do Spitfires. So it's sharing those ideas, and I love that. So when people do, we can help build better choices so people can connect. This is a celebration of life. This usually happens about a year, 6 months to a year after, where that visceral pain's subsided somewhat. Still there, obviously, for many, but it's more of a time of reflection rather than loss. And so the ashes provide that, I think, a really good opportunity to reflect on that person and memorialize them, because they loved them. So this is a good time where it's not just covered in grief, really.
Couldn't end on a nicer note. Thank you, Richard, for your time. You will be able to find Richard via the show notes, and all his connections will be there. But it's been great talking to you, Richard, about ashes and scattering ashes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for the invite, Tina. Much appreciated.
You've been listening to Good Goobyes, the Funeral Facts podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment and share. Drop any questions on our social media, on Instagram, or in the text option in the show notes.
Si and I are qualified professionals, but we always advise our clients to seek any additional support from medical practitioners if they need to. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay well and be kind to one another.